In this video, I'm going to be going over useRef, how it's different from useState, and then how we can also use it to manipulate HTML elements so that you can use it in your next project or even your current project if you need to use it. And by the end of this video, we're going to have a basic stopwatch app that works. Start button starts the stopwatch, and then we can also stop it. The references that I've used for this video are going to be down in the description below. And before we get started, make sure to like this video, subscribe so you don't miss upcoming lessons like this. Comment down below if you have any questions or if you have anything else you'd like to say. But now, let's get started. I've opened the official React website on useRef, and here's what it says about this hook. So, useRef is a React hook that lets us reference a value that's not needed for rendering. So it's pretty similar to useState, but instead of re-rendering each time we change the value, it's not going to do that. And a really nice feature that it also has is it allows us to manipulate DOM elements with this hook, which we can't do with useState. And so the useRef is actually going to be an object, and it's going to have two values. The first one is going to be the initial value. The second one is going to be the current value, but we're only going to see the current value because it's going to be set to the initial value, which in this one is just going to be 0. So useRef is actually going to be an object. So this is kind of what it would look like. So const, let's just say we called it ref. It would look like this. We would have a current. I'm going to zoom in. And then here, it was just 0 in that example. So that's what it looked like. So to actually see it, we would have to write ref.current, and then that would give us 0. Hopefully that makes sense now. Go ahead and create a new React project if you haven't already. And we're going to start by importing all the necessary stuff in the app.js. So the first import is going to be useState because we're going to be comparing useState and then also useRef. And then the last one is going to be useEffect, which we're going to use to see all of the re-renders. So let's go ahead and write useEffect. And then here in the callback function, we're just going to console log render and create our useState. So it's going to be count, set count, and that's going to be equal to useState. And then the default value is just going to be 0. Next thing we're going to do is remove all of this. We're going to create a button that's just going to say click me. And then on click, I'm just going to write it here. So we're going to set count to be equal to count plus 1. And I'm going to go ahead and start this. So npm start, there it is. It's going to start loading. Let's open the console, and we're already going to get 2 renders, and that's because in the index.js, we're using React strict mode, which is going to re-render everything twice. So if I remove this, save it, go back in here, we're only going to have 1 renders, so you can keep it or remove it, doesn't really matter. But now every time we click the click me button, we're going to get a re-render. So now if we go back here, and I'm going to comment this out, if we make our useRef variable, so I'm just going to write count, that's going to be equal to useRef, and then the initial value here is going to be equal to 0. And so every time we click it, let's actually make a function for that, so const handle click. And in here, let's just console log the count, so the useRef, just to see what we get from there. So change this to handle click, and we should actually get an object back. So when we click it, we're going to get our object with the current of 0, which is going to be the initial value. Now, if we go in here and then we write count.current, it's going to be count.current plus 1. Then here we click the button, we can see that it's going to keep going up. So we can just write count.current to not get the whole object, and every time we click it, we can see that it's going to add up, and we're going to get no re-renders. So that's the nice thing about it. And now that we know the very basics of useRef and the difference between useRef and useState, I'm going to go over how we can access HTML elements and why it's really important to know, because sometimes you just can't really do anything without using it. So I'm going to go ahead and create an input, and we have to add an attribute called ref. And that's just going to be equal to our ref. So I removed the 0 here, and the ref is going to be count. So let's just change this to input. Write that in here, comment this out, or actually we can move this line, uncomment this, and then change this to input. And now if we go back here and click on the button, we're going to get the actual HTML element returned. So we can really do anything we want with it. So let's say we had a class of input, or we had an ID of something important. So let's just say test, and we had to get that ID for some reason. So what we could do is write input.current.id. And if we click on that, we're going to get our ID. Same goes for class name. So class name. Now if we click it, we're going to get input. So we can really do anything we want with it, or we can actually also log out the value. So let's just say we write something in here, press on click me, we're gonna get our value. And also one more thing we can do is, let's just say we have count, and then every time we do something with the input, so let's just say the value, this is gonna be count, and then on change, so on change, we can write all of this, and then now we can see the amount of re-renders we're gonna get. So every time we write something, we're gonna get a re-render every time we change the input. But now that we have useRef, we don't really have to do that because we can just write input.current.value, and then we're gonna have the same thing without actually causing a re-render every time we do that. So let's remove the value count. I'm gonna actually just remove this whole element from there. And now if we write something, we're not going to get a re-render, and even when we click it, we're still not going to get a re-render, but we're going to get the value that we wanted. But we can honestly do whatever we want with it. So instead of console logging stuff, we can write input.current.focus, which is going to focus on the input. So when we click it, it's going to focus, and we can write anything and can change the styles. So styles dot whatever you want to do. So we can change the background color to be, let's just say red. When we click it, and the error was there because I misspelled styles, and it should be styles. So style, we're going to change the background to red. When we click it, it turns to red, and we can do anything we want with it. Now let's actually go ahead and use it in an actual example. So we're going to make a stopwatch from the React website. So let's go ahead and remove everything. I'm just going to create this function again. So function app. And here we're going to start by initializing some stuff. So I'm just going to actually remove all of that too. We're going to start by initializing all of our variables. So we're going to have 3 of them. 2 of them are going to be useState. The last one is going to be our useRef. The first one is going to be our start time. Then we're going to have set start time, which is going to be useState, and that's going to be equal to null. Next one is going to be our now, and then set now, which is also going to be useState, and that's going to be equal to null. The next one is going to be our useRef, so const interval ref, and that's going to be useRef, which is also going to be null. And in here, let's return an empty object here with an h1. That's just going to say time. And here we're just going to write a certain element. Let's go in here and return an empty object. So let's use the brackets before we do that. Brackets. Here we're going to have an empty object, and here we're just going to have an h1. That's going to say time. And we actually need to make a variable here. So we're going to write let time, and that's going to be 0. Let's actually write seconds passed, and we're going to set that to 0. And here we're going to print it out. So seconds passed. The next thing we're going to do is create our button here. So under the h1, we're going to have 2 buttons. First one's going to be start. The next one is going to be stop. And we're going to have 2 functions. So on click, this one is going to be called handle start. This one is going to be handle stop. So on click, handle stop. After we finish writing all of this, I'm going to go over this whole code, which hopefully will help you understand how this works a little bit more. So in here, we're going to write const handle start. And in here, we're going to set our useStates to be date.now. And we're also going to do set now to be date.now. Then we're going to have our other function, which is going to be called handle stop. And this is an error function. So let's fix that part. And here we're going to create an interval, which is actually going to be our useRef. So let's go ahead and actually make it first by going into handle start. And in here, we're going to start by writing interval ref. So interval ref dot current. And we're going to set that to be an interval. So set interval. And then in here, we're going to have our callback function where we're going to set now to be date.now. And this is going to run every 10 milliseconds, not 20, but 10. And handle stop, we're going to clear this interval. So clear interval, interval ref.current. And now we actually have to set our seconds passed to be equal to something. So what we're going to do is we're going to get our now, and then we're going to subtract that from start time. And let's actually just console log that before we do anything. So let's write an if statement first that checks that now, or let's just start with start time doesn't equal to null, and then also now doesn't equal to null. And then in here, let's console log. So console log now, and then under that, or we could just do that. So, and let's just console log this. So we're gonna have now and then start time and see what we get here. So when we press on start and stop, this is what we're gonna get. This is gonna be in milliseconds, so it's not really gonna make sense. So let's try to do this first. So now divided by 1,000, and then do the same thing here. So start time divided by 1,000, or that's too much, so there it is. Start and stop. We can see that it's still not really going to make much sense, but we're subtracting the time that we're currently on minus the time that we started. So we're getting the actual current time right now, and then we're subtracting it from the time that we started this timer from. So let's go ahead and actually do it how it's supposed to be. So now minus start time, and we have to do all of that divided by 1,000, because if we start this now and pause it, we can see that it's in milliseconds. So this is going to be 1 second, 0.511. So we're going to do that. So do this divided by 1,000. And now when we start it, we can see that it's actually going to work now. So let's remove this, or we can copy this. Seconds passed is going to be now minus start time divided by 1,000. And now this should work. So if we press on start, we can see that the time goes up, and then when we press on stop, it's going to stop. But I'm going to try to go over all this code so that it hopefully makes sense to you. So for these two variables right here, the useState ones, for start time, this is going to be a variable that stores time when we actually started the timer from. And then the now useState variable stores the current time so that we can subtract those two to get the time that's been passed in milliseconds. And then we divide all of that by 1,000 over here. Then we have our handle start function. We start by setting our start time and set now to the current time by using date.now. And then we're also setting our useRef to be an interval that updates every 10 milliseconds. Then we have our handle stop function, which just clears this interval and then stops all of that. And then we have our seconds passed variable, which changes here if our start time and now doesn't equal to null. And then we have our now minus start time, which is going to give us the time passed after we press on the start button in milliseconds, which is why we divide that by 1,000, which is going to convert that to seconds. So hopefully after this video, you can use useRef in your projects and it makes sense to you. And this is where I'm going to end it. So I really hope that you enjoyed it. And if you did, then make sure to leave a like, subscribe so you don't miss upcoming React videos like this. Comment down below if you have any questions or if you have anything else that you'd like to say, and hopefully see you in the next video.